Welcome to the law offices of Chris Ingram's Immigration News Show. Today we ask, is top talent facing fewer open doors? We would like to thank attorney Chris Ingram and staff at the law offices of Chris Ingram for their hard work in preparing the research for this show, which draws on a wide variety of news sources from both sides of the aisle, providing a balanced view. Attorney Ingram is also a vocal advocate for the rights and protection of immigration applicants, although our coverage is designed to be nonpartisan. Please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our channel. We are also on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Reddit, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. You can also visit our website on www.breakthroughusa.com. We'd love to see you there. Disclaimer. Please note that this presentation should not be intended as legal advice for your specific situation. If you, a friend, or a family member would like a free consultation, you can visit our website at www.breakthroughusa.com and schedule an appointment. We'd love to hear from you and help you if we can. We'd also like to point out that this presentation was created using AI hosts. Okay, let's dive in.
Yeah, I am so ready to get into this one.
Right. So if we look at the United States right now, it is basically staring down this massive deficit, like a shortage of 1.4 million tech workers by the year 2030.
Which is just, a staggering number to even think about.
It really is. But at the exact same time, major American institutions are putting these hard pauses on hiring foreign talent in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah, it's a profound contradiction. I mean, the U.S. desperately needs this highly skilled workforce to keep its edge in these emerging industries.
Exactly.
But the actual mechanisms to bring that talent into the lab or the boardroom are just getting remarkably complex. We're seeing friction at almost every level.
So today, for this deep dive, we are figuring out how these two totally opposing realities exist simultaneously.
Right.
Because if you are an international student trying to map out your post-graduation plans, or an engineer already in the field, or even a startup founder trying to build the next big thing, you are currently navigating a massive paradox.
You really are.
Yeah.
And to understand the stakes of that friction, we have to start by establishing why this specific pipeline of global talent is so vital in the first place.
Definitely. And our legal team highlighted a story that just perfectly crystallizes this. It's about Omar Yagi.
Oh, yeah. The chemist at UC Berkeley.
Right, a Jordan-born chemist.
Yeah.
And he literally just shared the 2025 Nobel Prize in Chemistry alongside Susumu Kitagawa and Richard Robson.
Which is, the absolute pinnacle of scientific achievement.
It doesn't get higher than that. And the Nobel Organization awarded them for the development of something called metal organic frameworks.
Right, MOFs.
Yeah, and the organization described this breakthrough as creating new rooms for chemistry.
Which is such a poetic way to describe a very practical, world-altering technology.
It really is. But I want to make sure we actually understand the mechanism behind that, because it isn't just, abstract academia.
Sure.
So think of these metal organic frameworks like microscopic, highly customizable sponges.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. But instead of wiping up a spill on your kitchen counter, you engineer these sponges at the molecular level to trap extremely specific elements.
Wow. So they target specific things.
Exactly. You could design one to pull pure drinkable water straight out of arid desert air.
That's incredible.
Or you could design another to act as this molecular net that only captures carbon dioxide emissions directly from a factory exhaust pipe. So it completely prevents those greenhouse gases from hitting the atmosphere.
What's fascinating here is how Yagi connects this incredibly high-level atomic scale engineering to basic human dignity.
What do you mean by that?
Well, in a public event following the announcement, he didn't just talk about chemical bonds. He talked about his vision for water independence.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the idea that a family anywhere in the world could have their own water supply, completely independent of crumbling municipal infrastructure or geographic drought. He is aiming this complex chemistry squarely at human resilience.
But, looking at Omar Yagi's story, I think it's very easy to assume this only applies if you are a literal generational genius.
Right, like it's out of reach.
Yeah. It almost feels alienating to the average hardworking software engineer or data analyst. So, beyond the science, what does this specific story say to the listener who is navigating the immigration system right now?
Well, that is the exact trap people fall into. They view these monumental success stories as outliers that have nothing to do with their own journey.
Exactly.
But attorney Chris Ingram shared an insight on this specific story that completely flips that assumption. Chris noted that your background does not prevent you from doing work that matters at the highest level.
That's a great point.
In many cases, it actually strengthens your perspective. Yagi himself advised students to look at their immediate surroundings and just, dig deeper.
Dig deeper. I love that.
Yeah. The core takeaway from our team's analysis is that relentless curiosity and rigorous preparation are the actual prerequisites for success, regardless of where you started.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because getting to that level of achievement, building those new rooms for chemistry, it requires a launch pad.
It absolutely does.
You need a laboratory, a university, an initial employer willing to take a chance on you. And recently, some of those launch pads have been aggressively pulled away.
Yep, they have.
Our researchers found a major development from March 3rd, 2026. This is regarding the State University System of Florida.
Which is a highly disruptive development. According to a Reuters report, Florida's public universities, and that includes all 12 institutions in that state system, have temporarily halted the hiring of foreign faculty members on H-1B visas.
And this suspension is scheduled to last all the way until January 5, 2027.
That is nearly a full academic year of restricted recruitment.
It's massive. And to put the scale of that into perspective, our legal research points out that in the prior year, more than 600 beneficiaries have been approved for H-1B visas by those exact same Florida schools.
Wow.
Yeah, we're talking about 600 highly specialized academics, medical researchers, and engineering faculty.
Well, it is vital to understand the mechanics of what is actually happening here. This comes down to the stark difference between federal immigration law and institutional policy.
Right.
Because the state of Florida does not have the jurisdiction to change federal immigration statutes. The H-1B visa category remains fully intact at the federal level.
Okay, so the federal government hasn't changed the visa.
Exactly. The U.S. government is still processing and approving those petitions. What shifted is the behavior of the employer.
I see.
The institutions made an internal policy choice to hit pause on utilizing that specific federal pathway.
Wait, if there is such a massive demand for STEM talent in the U.S., why would a major university system put a hard pause on recruiting specialized minds? I mean, you're saying it's just internal policy, but if I am an aerospace researcher who just had a 10-year track offer pulled by one of those universities, the distinction between federal law and state policy is practically meaningless.
You're completely right.
I still don't have the job, and I still don't have the visa sponsorship.
You are entirely right to push back on that. Because the on-the-ground reality for the applicant is identical. The door is closed.
Exactly.
And this highlights a strategic reality that attorney Chris Ingram repeatedly emphasizes. Having legal eligibility for a visa absolutely does not guarantee you will find an institution willing to sponsor it.
That's a tough reality.
It is. Employer policies can and do shape actual opportunity just as much as the law itself. Chris warns that it is wise to pay attention not only to the law, but also to how institutions are responding to it.
So true. You have to monitor the ecosystem you are trying to enter.
Right. If a state university system pauses hiring, what is the macro effect? Does that talent just sit around and wait?
Well, they definitely don't wait.
Exactly. We start looking at the concept of brain drain. That's specialized talent, those 600 potential researchers.
Yeah.
They'll simply pivot. They might go to private research firms in California or Massachusetts. Or, increasingly, they might take their expertise to rival tech hubs in Canada, the United Kingdom, or Australia. Institutional pauses don't stop the global flow of talent. They merely redirect it.
But, it isn't just localized institutions acting as bottlenecks. The federal machinery itself is fundamentally changing how it processes the talent that does actually secure sponsorship.
Oh, absolutely. It's getting much more intense.
Yeah, our legal team noted that on March 33, 2026, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, issued a public notice regarding their strengthened screening and vetting.
And the tangible mechanism they're using to enforce this is incredibly disruptive to people's daily lives.
So what are they doing?
Well, they're drastically shortening the validity periods for certain employment authorization documents, the EADs.
Right. Our team pulled the specific notice from January 12, 2026. For certain newly issued EADs, the maximum validity period was slashed from 5 years down to just 18 months.
Which is wild. Just like Yagi's molecular sponges are engineered to trap highly specific resources, the current U.S. immigration vetting process is acting like this hyper-restrictive filter.
Yeah.
It's trying to capture the absolute highest tier talent and ensure absolute security, but the pores of this system, the visa timelines and EAD validity periods, are getting so small that they're creating massive structural friction.
You finally got your family together on a H-1B. Your American dream begins. Your employer files for your EB-2 green card, but the wait is over 11 years. As the years go by, frustration grows, and now the company is talking about layoffs. This could be the end of your American dream. You search for help, but luckily, you land on breakthroughusa.com. They listen, reassured you, and built your EB-1 case with precision. Then one day, a notification buzzes, EB-1 approved. With your EB-1 green card, your entire family can breathe.
I have got my visa. I got my visa.
That's why the law offices of Chris M. Ingram is trusted. Your future shouldn't wait. Let's talk EB-1.
What are the next steps?
Need help with your visa? Book your free consultation now at www.breakthroughusa.com and let us take care of you.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's do the math on that friction.
Okay.
If my work authorization is valid for 18 months, but the processing time to get a renewal approved takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months, I am essentially spending almost half of my authorized working life in a state of pending paperwork.
Exactly.
So, for the listener who is meticulously planning their career timeline, how disruptive is this drop from 5 years to 18 months? How is a founder supposed to secure venture capital, or a researcher supposed to run a multi-year clinical trial under those conditions?
This raises an important question about the psychological and practical toll this environment demands. When your EAD is valid for 5 years, you have the runway to actually innovate.
Yeah, you can breathe.
Right. You buy a home, you establish roots, you focus deeply on the work you were brought here to do. When that runway shrinks to 18 months, you are forced into a defensive posture.
Constantly looking at the clock.
Yes. You are constantly monitoring processing times, gathering duplicate documentation, and looking over your shoulder at a calendar. The federal pathway still exists, but the burden of proof and the demand for absolute pristine organization has skyrocketed.
It honestly sounds like a recipe for extreme burnout. If the government is purposely creating a higher friction environment, how does the listener actually survive it without just giving up?
Well, this is where our legal team provides a very necessary reframing of the situation.
What do they suggest?
Attorney Chris Ingram advises that a stricter, more heavily vetted environment is a good reason to be more prepared, not more discouraged.
That makes sense.
If you know the validity periods are shorter, you build out your renewal timelines earlier. You maintain meticulous records from day one. You don't leave anything to chance or assume the agency will connect the dots for you.
Right. You have to be proactive.
Exactly. Clearer evidence and proactive planning shift the leverage back to the applicant. Chris notes that better records, earlier planning, and clearer evidence can make a meaningful difference. You cannot control the USCIS processing queue, but you can entirely control the quality and undeniable clarity of the petition you submit.
So basically requires treating the immigration process with the exact same rigorous discipline as the engineering or scientific work itself.
Exactly right.
But let's zoom out for a second. Because this localized hiring friction and this federal vetting bottleneck are colliding with the terrifying macroeconomic reality.
They really are.
The United States economy is currently facing an existential talent deficit. We cannot afford to lose this talent.
No, the numbers are staggering when you look at the projections for the next decade.
Yeah, let's walk through the raw data our researchers compiled. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects that computer and math occupations will grow by 10.1% between 2024 and 2034.
Wow.
Right. And for context, the average growth rate across all other U.S. jobs is just 3.1%. That is more than triple the demand.
It's massive.
Furthermore, the Semiconductor Industry Association expects 115,000 new jobs to be created in their sector by 2030 alone.
Oh.
But based on current domestic graduation rates, they project 67,000 of those jobs will remain completely unfilled.
That isn't just a tight labor market. That is a massive void in the foundation of advanced manufacturing.
Exactly. And when you look across the entire tech sector, the estimate balloons to 1.4 million tech jobs sitting empty by the end of the decade.
This is wild to think about.
And the economic impact is already showing. Our team looked at data from NAFSA, the Association of International Educators. In the 2024 to 2025 academic year, international students contributed $42.9 billion to the U.S. economy.
That is a huge injection of capital.
Yeah, and they supported over 355,000 jobs. But NAFSA is noting a projected drop for fall 2025, a drop of $1.1 billion and roughly 23,000 jobs.
Which means we are already losing ground.
Exactly. And then there's the AI race. The Institute for Progress analyzed the top artificial intelligence companies in the United States, and they found that 60% of them have at least one immigrant founder.
60%?
Not more than half. More than half of the foundational architecture of the U.S. AI industry was built by individuals who had to navigate this exact frictional immigration system.
That is incredible.
So what does this all mean? We throw around these millions and billions, but what does a 1.4 million worker deficit actually look like on the ground for the American economy? Imagine those unfilled tech jobs, unbuilt infrastructure, delayed innovations.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it looks like a slow erosion of global dominance.
Yeah.
It means critical infrastructure projects face years of delays because specialized engineering firms just can't staff their drafting rooms.
That's scary.
It means the software required to optimize our vulnerable supply chains simply doesn't get written in time for the next crisis.
Yeah.
And geopolitically, it means the U.S. risks falling behind in the most crucial technological race of our lifetime, artificial intelligence.
Right, the AI race.
Exactly. You realize that immigration policy is inextricably linked to industrial policy. We are in a geopolitical race to develop safe, effective AI and secure domestic semiconductor manufacturing.
We have to have the talent for that.
Right. If you intentionally throttle the pipeline of global talent, whether through 18-month EAD loops or state-level hiring freezes, you are actively throttling the speed of American technological development.
It's counterproductive.
Completely. Why do immigrants found 60% of top AI companies?
Yeah.
Because the act of uprooting your life, moving across the world, and navigating a hyper-complex legal system essentially acts as a filter for extreme resilience, high-risk tolerance, and relentless drive.
Wow.
Those are the exact psychological traits required to build a disruptive tech startup.
You are filtering for founders just by making them go through the process. That data completely shatters the narrative that immigrants are merely filling empty seats at the back of the room.
Yes.
They're the ones actually building the room, to borrow Omar Yagi's phrase.
And this data point is something our legal team believes is deeply validating for you, the listener.
How so?
Attorney Chris Ingram pointed out that this macroeconomic data helps people see that their work is not marginal to the American economy. Immigrants are contributing in highly visible, economically critical ways.
Absolutely.
Chris noted that understanding that can give people a stronger sense of purpose as they move through an uncertain process. When you are buried in paperwork, or dealing with the anxiety of a shortened work authorization, you can easily feel like a case number.
It's so easy to feel lost in the system.
But understanding this broader economic reality gives you your power back. You are fulfilling a strategic, multi-billion-dollar imperative for this country.
Yet, it leaves us with an incredibly uncomfortable tension. We know the math. We know the U.S. economy faces a catastrophic deficit of 1.4 million tech workers by 2030.
We have the numbers.
We know the AI revolution relies heavily on immigrant founders, and yet, simultaneously, institutional doors are tightening, and federal vetting is demanding far more friction from the applicant. How long can those opposing forces exist before something snaps?
Well, that is the defining question for the next decade of American innovation. The global talent pool is highly mobile.
Yeah, they have options.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If the friction of the U.S. system outweighs the perceived opportunity, the ecosystem will adapt by shifting elsewhere. The ultimate question for our listeners and for the policymakers watching this data is simple. Where will the next Omar Yagi choose to build his new rooms for chemistry?
Wow.
Because that generational talent will undoubtedly build them somewhere. The only variable is which country will reap the benefits.
It is a profound geopolitical shift happening right under our noses, disguised as bureaucratic paperwork. As you continue to navigate your own professional journey within this shifting landscape, I want to leave you with one final grounding thought from attorney Chris Ingram.
It's an important one.
Chris stresses this. Your talent matters, and your contribution is real. Wait, let me paraphrase that without stopping. Chris stresses that your talent matters and your contribution is real even when the process around you feels uncertain. Keep preparing with discipline, keep moving with wisdom, and remember that resilience is one of the strengths that brought you this far.
Resilience really is the ultimate prerequisite.
Yeah.
It is the one variable you entirely control.
Thank you so much for being with us today. We hope you gained a lot from this discussion. Please leave us a comment if you can. Additionally, you can support our channel by sharing it with your friends and family, helping us build this community together. Also follow us on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. We would also like to thank attorney Chris Ingram and his dedicated team once again for researching and preparing this material for our presentation. See you next time on Let's Talk U.S. Immigration. Bye for now.